Okay, so yesterday I posted the first preface and the first up to page 17, part one. Um, so I'll read just the last sentence of what I had read, where we left off. I knew Alfred would be home soon, and my thoughts congealed suddenly into a dreadful leaden weight falling down the dark well of circumstance. Fiona, time for dinner, honey. Come on in, I yelled out amidst the growing shadows in the unruly grove, scanning for her waifish form, which oftentimes could be found there. Turning back towards the house, I hurried through the tangled underbrush, catching my exposed ankle on the craggy protrusion of a cherry tree. As nearby plum and pear trees stood watching, I attended to the relatively small gash, blood just beginning to appear at the wound's opening. A small spot of it reddened the tip of my index finger, and I instinctively, almost reflexively, brought it to my lips. I thought of my own looming monthly blood stoppage and held my finger in my mouth extra long in some kind of extemporaneous effort to preserve my moon blood essence. Unbeknownst to Alfred, I had been saving my menstrual effusion in what is known as, to us few enlightened ones, as a diva cup, and mixing it into marinara sauces and fortified, quote-unquote, red wines. But only with close friends now, as Alfred was no longer eligible to receive the life-restorative gifts of the mother goddess. Back inside the house, the oven's timer had gone off. I grabbed 2 oven mitts and pulled the glass lasagna dish out immediately. Luckily, it was only a few minutes overcooked. I set the dish on a ceramic trivet, then glanced out the back kitchen window at the darkening grove and sky, which was just turning a plum color laced with romantic straggling scarlets. Just then I heard the new email alert go off in my back office. For some reason it seemed more urgent to me than usual, and I went immediately to check who it was from. I was hoping it might be from my poetry meetup group, or Friends of the Earth Committee, or something, but this message took a while for me to absorb. It said, from info@paradisehavenshome.com to Connie Gerard 65 at sharenet.com. Hello, Mrs. Gerard. My name is Spencer, and I'm the manager of Paradise Havens here in Sarasota, Florida. We're writing you because your mother Vivian has grown quite ill from her bouts of the flu and now pneumonia. She also has other aggravating health concerns that might require a family member close at hand to determine whether or not she should be put into hospital or hospice care at some time in the near future. The only reason we are getting a hold of you by email is we had you on in our file from years ago as her closest family member. Please let us know if you or another family member will be looking into this matter. Thank you, Spencer Shattuck, Paradise Havens Management Team. I don't know why the email from Paradise Havens shocked me so terribly. Perhaps it was the fact that my mother always seemed to have an iron constitution and will, and realizing she was in such a frail state now really shook me up. Perhaps it was also the wake-up call to my own mortality that the message presented. Whatever it was, I distracted myself with some other emails that had come in from various entities such as Freedom Fighters, Change Now, and Sheldon Valley Growers Association regarding this year's potential backyard harvest from my orchard and garden. That morning's edition of the Sheldon Valley Sentinel also caught my eye after I took it out of its rubber band with its front page news about 3 missing students from Fiona's school. I read with only the horror and dread that a parent with a child who attends the same school and likely knew these kids could feel. I was also slightly dubious about the addition or quotes from the mayor, which seemed overtly political. Quote, our children are the backbone of our society and our future, and we will fight the forces aligned against them and which threaten them on all fronts, unquote, went one of the quotes. Forces? What forces was he referencing exactly? On all fronts, quote-unquote, sounded to me like he thinks he's General Patton, or just your average self-important climbing politician. More likely. The sound of the back door slamming and someone sitting down at the table soon brought me back to events in my immediate vicinity. I went out to the kitchen and saw Fiona there, at the dining room table, her face downcast and her shoulders slumped slightly. Let me dish up your plate, sweetheart, I said, doing just that, wanting to ask her about her missing classmates, but not wanting to broach the subject just yet. Just a smidgen of normality, please, I thought. "Where's Daddy?" she asked in response, playing with a tendril of something she'd plucked from the yard instead of her e-juke, which I had thrown out after my fears and also annoyance that she was using it too much to block us out, to her great dismay, of course. "Oh, I'm sure he'll be joining us soon," I said, putting some homemade salad mix beside a nice big slice of lasagna, then setting the plate in front of Fiona with a knife and fork. She was staring into space again, her lucid blue eyes brimming with something. "How was school? Learn anything new?" I asked as I dished myself up and sat down next to her, or across from her. There was a kind of pale golden aura around her that made me think of the fireflies and butterflies she was always out trying to catch in the summertime. Just that Jimmy Rourke likes Serafina instead of me, and she likes Sebastian. And I'm pretty sure he's in love with me, so it's kind of a mess, she said with a heavy sigh, digging through the contents on her plate, her expression becoming gloomier. "Well, that's a lot of drama there. Too much for a 13, almost 14-year-old, I think," I replied. "Sometimes I really hate her," Fiona declared. "I thought you two were good friends," I inquired, truly puzzled, as Serafina had been by the house a couple of times recently to ask about Fiona and seemed very nice. "Were. She's a backstabber," she riposted angrily. "I wish she'd been one of the kids who disappeared. I wish it were summertime and I was at the lake," she stated, looking out the back window wistfully. The beginnings of twilight were starting to blow shadows across our grove, the manes of trees seemingly tossing themselves in response to her mean-spirited statement. "I can't wait for summer again," she said forlornly. "There will be other boys and other best friends. Believe me, Fiona," I advised, recalling my own juvenile disappointments. "I don't think that's a very nice thing to say about your friend, though. These kids are missing and have families who love and are worried about them," I reproved her. The vegetarian lasagna I had created seemed an adequate Epicurean consolation for the utter terror I felt when discussing life and relationships with my daughter. I felt like I was walking on stones while crossing a raging river. I could see the scenes of her fledgling trysting as I reached out psychically to her young, forming mind. I saw her walking with a boy who had a dangerous, rebellious James Dean air about him, and her kissing his cheek and running off. There was also a stealing off to darker, more forbidden pastures. A cemetery? Then came the dreaded daily slam of the front door. My heart rate immediately jumped reflexively, and the pains in my chest and temples began again. God, I hate him, I couldn't help thinking. I really don't know how much more I can take. I thought. "What's for dinner?" Alfred asked us as he came through the kitchen's archway from his TV cave, a vision of banal decadence in his rumpled detective uniform that seemed painfully cliché as well as déclassé. "Nice to see you too," I disingenuously replied, not looking at him. He laughed a weak little kind of snigger, just as disingenuously disingenuously inquired as to how our days went, then hung up his raincoat. He sat down at the table and stared at me with his craggy, perspiring countenance, as if to say, "Well, where's my dinner?" How 1950s of us, I thought, as I rose, filled up his plate, and set it down perfunctorily in front of him. "No arsenic here, dear," I thought, mischievously in wishful thinking mode. Alfred looked up at me, seemingly in response to that thought, and my blood froze for a moment. Can he read my mind, too? I wondered, smiling a somewhat fake smile back at his oddly questioning face. "You make any new psychic predictions today there, Princess Voltaine?" Alfred questioned between ramming forkfuls of food into his maw. I decided on a humorous approach to his needling. "I predict you'll enjoy this lasagna, and that Queen Chandevilla of Voltaine 4, and that's Queen Chandevilla of Voltaine 4, actually," I corrected boldly and cheekily, which received the usual scoff and shake of his pedestrian head. "Woo, woo, woo, pardon me, your majesty. How about dishing me up some more of that, whatever it is you made there, Julia child?" he said, trying to affect his pretty pleased puppy dog-eyed look for me. My stomach turned. "Veggie lasagna a la Girard. So, you like it?" I asked, though not caring of the reply. Not bad, not bad." came the eventual reply from a man I really no longer recognized. How quickly love turns, but how long and slow it burns, I internally mused, sadly in light of my valiant efforts to keep up all appearances. Solve any high-profile crimes out there, Sherlock Holmes? I dared. Fight fire with fire. Alfred guffawed sardonically. Well, now that you mention it, we do seem to have what appears to be a killer and an arsonist on our hands here in Sheldon Vale, he declared with affected seriousness. Really? Fiona and I replied in unison. Looking at each other, I felt some faraway sense of baleful foreboding, which I wished were just my fanciful head playing games again. Fiona's thought mirrored my own. Here in this sleepy little town where nothing ever happens? Really, he replied. Turns out Jean Miller's death was a homicide. You mean the old widowed woman who owned the country store? I asked, not believing how anyone could possibly want her dead. I thought they said it was a heart attack. Yeah, well, life is full of surprises. We found poison in her system, he snapped callously. Got any leads there, Elliot Ness? I countered. On that, or the missing kids from Fiona's school? Yeah, that troublemaker. He's Fiona's classmate. Jimmy Rourke's his name. We picked up a friend of his as a suspect today who eventually ratted him out. He's the one who torched those churches, and he also tried to burn the school down, apparently. He shot Fiona a loaded look and sounded like he was still on the Philadelphia force and was busting the Son of Sam or something. Nothing on the missing kids yet, he continued curtly, unduly dismissive of what I thought would be of great concern to him. Impossible. Not Jimmy. It can't be, Fiona nearly shrieked, shocking both of us as she searched her father's face for something, decency, truth. Reading into it, I saw that it wasn't at all Jimmy. It wasn't all Jimmy. That his friend or other boy did most of it and blamed him, but who am I to question the Sherlock Holmes of Sheldon Valley? Fiona's rather smitten with Jimmy, it seems, I explained as I bit into my culinary creation, proud of the delicious product. Oh, really? You're not going to go anywhere near that bum, young lady? He's a criminal, barked Alf, a vein popping out on his head. What makes you think he's a criminal, huh? Or do you believe anything any punk you pick up on the street tells you? Fiona erupted again at her father, then shoved her chair away and ran up to her room. Proud of yourself? Alfred asked, though I could only stare back in numb disbelief at his misguided query. I read into his thoughts and saw that he was holding out about the killings, that there were dead humans involved as well. Reflexively, I went back to my divine lasagna no one seemed to care much for. It became the most delicious, sought-after thing in the universe, the new spice melange. Alfred became a Harkonnen, though an ultimately impotent one, simply an annoyance I could tune out, or turn into a cartoon or anything I wanted. I can read your mind, I thought, just like the song went. God, I'm good, I marveled to myself about my talents in the kitchen. To hell with those who offered up no thanks to the goddess. I didn't even take note when Alfred shoved off in his usual self-satisfied hurry. Another realization jutted forth into my mental field, that Alfred and his department were looking for a scapegoat and were covering up something. Which didn't surprise me. I really wish many times that I could turn off my ESP, but I was born this way for a special reason. I'd known it since I could remember. It was my cosmic compass by which I could discern and steer the course of my life beyond what was in the normal human range of perception and ability. I went to bed that night after Alfred made a clumsy and futile attempt at making up, with sex as its goal. Then, able to read the writing on my walls, made a little outburst about me being frigid or something, then turned over in disgust and almost immediately began snoring. Lying there, while thinking that either I or he had to leave this bed and relationship, a swirl of chaotic musings gathered like a maelstrom. My ailing mother, Fiona's rebellious, troubled, vulnerable, yet unfettered state, my dissolving marriage, the spring planting and garden tending I had to do, my novel, and now these child disappearances and animal killings and weird police cover-up energy surrounding them. I let out a long sigh and imagined them all trailing out of my body and dissipating into the darkness of my too-still bedroom. I lay in a fake marriage bed next to a man who had completely morphed from a caring, wonderful person I once knew and adored into an insufferable monster. Loathing of everything that surrounded me filled me, even as I relaxed myself with pranayama, or basically controlled breathing in the Indian style posture. Focusing myself toward a sleep state, I finally threw off the bed covers after about an hour of such futile madness, reached over to my nightstand and took a kava kava, washing it down with the last of the tea I had been drinking. I got up and went down into the darkened house in the late wee hours, my usual theater of operations, when all is clear and quiet and free, and felt the house's own dream thoughts as I sat on my low divan and centered myself. For some reason, I couldn't leave well enough alone. I do have a problem with that. And felt into Alfred's dream and recoiled almost immediately in horror. He was dreaming he had a gun for a penis and wanted to. Ugh! I'm married to Ted Bundy all of a sudden. And Fiona, where was my free-spirited sprite tonight? I knew she wasn't the runaround type. She would sneak out sometimes just to drift in the night wind or commune with the fairies, as Florian characterized it. See the moon sometimes. She had that artist's fire and rage for freedom, so we learned not to shackle her too much. I tuned into her thoughts, and 'twas he, Jimmy Rourke. She was out somewhere with him, and he was making nonchalant attempts to grasp her, but she was being an elusive gadfly, flitting about him, doing the teenage version of playing hard to get. He was acting as cool as ice water, saying things like, "I've known lots of girls like you," etc. He's older than I thought he was. She wants to run away with him. He smiles at James Dean. I could care less smile. And she pirouettes again. And then round and round the world would my overing mind go, merging into the cosmic mind, adrift on the stellar wind, witnessing the heavenly bodies and their slow motion trajectories. I could read into and access anything I wanted to when the spirit and mind were willing enough, as they were tonight. The more my terrestrial world became more fractious, more tenuous, the more my spiritual fantasy and cosmic life blossomed. 2 days from a full moon, the prodigious light poured down, trying to entreat the darkness to better. I lit a few candles, then sat on a low mat and went into zazen, looking for samadhi again. After relaxing with some alternate nostril and vibratory breathing, I was immediately whisked away to my imagined yet quite real homeworld of Voltaine 4, where I proceeded to have the most intense bilocation to that world so far. During my peregrination, I learned that I most certainly wasn't making it up or hallucinating it. A higher expression of myself was some kind of hyperhuman or demiurgic deity. I was sitting on a massive throne above a monstrous altar that looked out from atop a kind of citadel keep across 1,000 Versailles. The most intricately and deftly engineered gardens I could have ever conceived of surrounded me. My supervision allowed me to zoom in on any part or parcel of my kingdom. There were great beasts in these free ranges that resembled our own, to an extent, such as elephants, horses, zebras, lions, tigers, camels, along with many others that were not of this earth. Striped and horned and colored were they in such fabulous variety that I could have stayed there for an eternity watching and counting them all, peacefully commingling. There was prosperity down there too, or at least the appearance of it, in the form of an almost carnivalesque potpourri of merchants and sellers of all types. Performers and people who were all arranged as if at some great galactic exposition or fantasy fair were gathered in such astonishing number and order that pride surged through my breast. Assured as I was by the aura of peace resplendent throughout my vision's path that this was exactly how a kingdom ought to be ruled if one were to have a monarchic or any other style of rule. My Majesty, Queen of the Semahib and Planet Voltaine 4 entire, it is my great pleasure to greet you on this day, said a jolly but obsequious figure who approached me on my right-hand side. I could see many courtiers behind him and surrounding me on all sides with my omniscient vision. I knew his name. "'Tis my pleasure as well, Shen Ramabi. It is truly a wondrous day to behold. What is the news of the kingdom of the Semahib?" I asked, though knowing I could full well read into it and know the news intuitively myself. The asking was for a confirmation. I gazed downward, gently awestruck at the colorful Balinese or Burmese-style adornments on my arms and lower body. This is truly a day of grand celebration, not only in the kingdom of the Semihib, but in kingdoms around the world entire, as this is the day when you are to have the title of Grand Empress bestowed upon you, my queen, said Shen Ramabi, bowing with a slight curtsy as he said this. The courtiers gathered around us also curtsied as well, prideful joy refulgent in their countenances. My heart surged with happy excitement as I felt the whole kingdom do the same. The threat of the Archons has at last waned, my majesty. Our light armadas return victorious. Our children play under peaceful skies, and our great beasts forage and romp in animal glory, he continued eloquently. His eyes brightened as I felt the truth of his words. This most certainly was the lifting of a veil. Nothing hidden, no ulterior plots or motives, just universal beings coming to live in their fullest potential in a breathtaking array of life and flourishing creativity. Thank you, Shen Ramabi, I said as he closed his eyes and bowed further. It is now decreed by supreme divine authority that I am the Grand Empress of Voltaine IV, the Pamor Tian Shen Deviya. I will fulfill this role as I have sought to live my life, with a sense of justice and care for all life, as truly is connoted by that name. I am that I am, the Shen Deviya Pamor Tian, Grand Empress of Voltaine IV, and even now of the defeated Archons who will be relegated to the pit-mining wastes of Nolomod for eternity. A tremendous roar went up from those gathered in the immediate court as well as those throughout the great square and in the city Semihib Yav. I felt the jubilation of nearly 10 million souls surge upward with the force of a supernova. Indeed it was. No more will the Archons poison our air and water, disturb our land and animals, kidnap our people and brainwash them or murder them. Our children will live in a whole and free kingdom, able to pursue life on all fronts, even striking out now to terraform the Barad desert and beyond, I pronounced to another roar of cheers. Who are you talking to, Mom? Came the soft, familiar voice interrupting my regal reverie. It took several seconds to reorient myself to earth and my daughter's inquiry. Without opening my eyes, back in the partially moonlit dark of the living room, I said, It is a dream imagining, dear, for Mommy's book. I'm acting out the characters. Oh, was her slow-to-understand reply. I finally opened my eyes to see her staring at me as if I was an insane person. She wore the same white gold tunic again she'd been wearing on a number of recent nights, only at night it seemed. It sounded like you were speaking another language. I couldn't understand it. Well, would you like to, honey? It's a language I created, spoken in my alternate world, I offered, trying not to compound my daughter's thinking that her mother was a crazy person. She'd already gotten a head full of crap from her father that I was cuckoo, so what can you do but be what you are? Or lie and be something I'm not, and send that message to my child? Sure, she said in a thin, silky voice. She twirled over to the large living room window, looking up through our large oak trees at the almost full moon. We learned in science class that the moonlight is actually reflected sunlight. I see a face always watching over me. The other night it was orange, she stated with subdued yet childlike wonder. Was that when you were out with Jimmy Rourke? I queried. Fiona spun around to look at me in disbelief. Yes, hun, I see and know all, I read her mind. How can I possibly know that you were out with Jimmy Rourke the night before last? I asked her, then telepathically sent her, You know Mom is psychic and has great powers of perception, honey. And that is how I know. Her eyes grew big for a second, and she looked almost embarrassed, then mad. Stay out of my head, and my life, she exclaimed, running out of the room. Remaining in lotus position on my mat and staying centered and calm, I sent her a follow-up message that Mommy loves her very much and just wants her to be safe. With a willful teenager and free spirit, what can one do but send her love? Just send her love and guidance. You can't force anything upon them. I read into Jimmy Rourke's energy field, though, and saw that he was a very troubled boy. I saw a broken family, broken homes, broken heart, and a rebellious soul masking great grief with bravado. Doing the same with Florian's son Sebastian's energy field, I saw almost a total opposite kind of persona. A sweet, unselfish boy, though also a child of now single parentage, but who I also saw truly loved Fiona. They'd played together intermittently as children for the 7 years we've lived here in Sheldon Vale. I saw that Fiona had a fondness for him, but was not held by the same attraction that she had for the more dangerous and so probably more thrilling Jimmy. Fiona's birthday was coming up in a few weeks on Beltane. Perhaps I could arrange a little party that Sebastian might attend. Sorry, I got lost there. Perhaps I could arrange a little party that Sebastian might attend. The thought pleased me. Distracted though I had been from my bilocational meditation, I plunged back into it and was this time whisked to someplace on our own earth, to where dark powers were plotting something black and deeply evil. I gasped when I had seen and felt too much, snapping my eyes open. Our own government, the president himself, gave the orders to blow up the plane over Colorado. It had 12 scientists involved in agricultural reform and clean technologies on it that were ready to bury Monsanto and other offensive and polluting corporations, I said aloud, seeing it clearly. They're assassinating these high adepts in the arts and sciences and in politics the world over. Can heaven save us, or will we have to save ourselves? I thought. Sadly, I saw that the latter was most likely true, for verily we are the creators of heaven or hell on earth, whichever we as individuals or collectively choose. Suddenly I was hit with an energy surge, causing a very intense but thankfully short-lived episode that felt like my heart spinning out of control, and my brain being put into a vice. I knew what it was, and I had, over the last several months, learned to assimilate these galactic downloads, or what I came to call solar infusions, better and better. This one was the most pointed one yet, and gave me what felt like low-level but steady electroconvulsive shocks to the system. I just breathed into it, as Gregory, my guru, quote-unquote, at the yoga center had advised, and after only about 5 to 10 minutes I had transmuted the incoming energies into pure light, shining in my veins and all my cells, every atom of my body infused and radiating an energy that felt very similar to the outpouring of joy and ecstasy I felt on my home planet. During this, I had seen many things in my mind's eye, but the most important was that I saw Fiona had gone back to her own dreams and was immersed in a very bucolic fairy world of beauty, of sheer beauty. That was her reactionary panacea to cold reality, just as I had my monarchic fantasy world. My husband's, on the other hand, was a very macho exterior and gun, which unfortunately still hadn't been rubbed off by our current pastoral setting as antidote to the increasing negativity of urban life, or life in general. We had spent 12 years together in our hometown of Philadelphia, and the best of his disposition I had yet seen was expensive making-up gifts, like flowers, jewelry, and pricey vacations. He was falling more and more into the vicious circle of abuse and subsequent make-up gifting. It was getting ridiculous. Who the hell wants to take a Caribbean cruise anyway with someone who just called you a worthless C-word? I won't say it on this post. I finally told Alfred about 6 months ago, I don't want your pandering makeup gifts if they come from a place of hostility, trying to repair its own image. And that shut him up for a good while. Life went on as routinely as possible until he started flaring up again recently. I had read into these energy surges of his for a long while, and had seen that they were mostly due to his quick-tempered Irish blood and background of having a father who was an unforgiving disciplinarian. Same old story here in the Western world, right? Everybody just passing the abuse on down the line, but lately there seemed to be more to it. Maybe he was sensing that I had gone from him completely, emotionally, which I'm sure sent him into some other woman's arms. In fact, I had seen his pathetic attempts to romance various other women and their rejections of him, mostly. I looked the other way at his floozy affairs, though I think he understood on a very subliminal level that I knew what he was doing, and that things like my plants, art, and poetry group took precedence over what was on his dinner plate when he chose to act out in that fashion. In any event, we were soon living in two utterly separate and distinct worlds. I decided at one point that I must fight the urge to shut myself into my lonely cocoon and reach out more to friends and family. I tried to spend as much time away from my nightmare domicile as possible, so I started visiting Florian more often. he and I would get into these grand, billowing discussions about all kinds of things, unorthodox things. It was so strange. It was like if I could have the personality and mind of Florian in the body of my husband, but then there is no ideal person who can satisfy us on every level all the time, is there? You show me one, and I will show you a lie or a temporary fix at best, quite likely. I mean, perhaps a tiny coterie of people in the world, or in history, have been blessed thusly. But for the rest of us, life is a series of trade-offs, ups and downs, a hodgepodge of thises and that's, which run hot, cold, and warm if you're lucky. You just take what you can and leave the rest behind. Anyway, for a while there, I sort of hid away amongst Florian's gardens and glorious collectibles, memorabilia, exotic pets, and above all, his library. His house was filled to the rafters with books on all kinds of occult and esoteric subjects, magic, alchemy, astronomy, Gnosticism, obscure books on philosophy, poetry, art, and many more that were apparently homemade by Florian and his wife, I found out later, on especially botanical or animal subjects and themes. What happened to her, I asked, when flipping through the deteriorating pages of one of his arcane and fascinating books on magic. One snowy day, as we sipped mulled wine, and I tried forgetting that my husband would probably be hunting me down soon. Reading into his energy, I saw that he was with his cohorts and floozies down at Finn's, the local tavern, being a soused buffoon. Who, Lisette? Oh, that's a long and rather dreary story, he began, walking towards me with a strange look in his eye. Why revisit that madness when we can get on talking about magic, mysticism, art, all these wonderful things that I know we share a love of? He gestured grandly at his bookshelves with a crescendo in his voice and an innocently wicked countenance. Impish, you could say. Something about him felt like it could go over Niagara Falls any moment, but also that he might just take off on his own magic carpet right above them instead of falling like every other poor mortal. I just chortled, shook my head, and took a long sip of the wine. What is it, Connie? He asked, rather insecurely, going through his books. He put one rather huge antique book back and came and sat down next to me on the couch. What is it with you, Constance? What do you want? In what sense do you mean, Florian? Though I sipped the warm wine, a chill still stole through me like a profligate thief. I zipped up my jacket. I want to borrow this one. Can I? I asked about the book I'd been flipping through. Ah, the Magisterium Magnificum, an English translation of a Nordic book on magic from around the time of the Crusades. You must be very careful with that one, Constance, for it contains many keys to sorcery and how to create a magical existence for yourself, Florian said with a serious, grave tone but twinkle in his blue-gray eye. You know I will be, I answered, looking him in his eyes, serious eyes, and looking down upon it like a proud mother with a new baby. I know you will be, he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. I suddenly had a flash of him being some kind of Merlin, or even more obscure Hierophant or sorcerer reincarnated. Just be sure and hide it from that bulldog you're married to. He might try to burn it, and you, at the stake. Das verboten Gott. God forbid in German. I sort of nervously laughed at that, but saw the truth behind it. I intuited that his German phrase meant God forbid. Alfred might, in some stupid rage, destroy this treasure, and I didn't want that. Florian read my mind. Best to leave it here for now, probably, then, eh? I nodded my head and hummed a reluctant assent to that. So, you never answered me, he continued. About what again? My mind was now distracted, sucked away into an empire of occult mysticism and lost knowledge, hidden away as it was to keep mankind in the dark. The book was impressing itself upon me like a bold, loquacious dinner guest. I put the book down on the coffee table and sat down on the couch to catch my racing thoughts. What do you want? I mean, from life. What will you do with this madman who disrespects you so? Are you cold? Let me throw some wood on the fire. I pondered his queries as he threw a large piece of oak in the fireplace. Tell me what happened to Lisette, and I will tell you what I'm going to do about Alfred the Terrible, I proposed. Florian laughed. He sat back down on the couch beside me. He was wearing some Bavarian winter getup like Lederhosen or something, his long body stretching out cat-like, always needing more space than it had. Strange, I'm getting to know this man as well as my own husband. I shied a bit from the thought. I say we will have no more marriage, I thought, thinking of Hamlet's words. Let's see. Lisette was very beautiful, was in love with nature, music, animals. We used to go out and go mushroom or plant hunting in the hills near Munich. We had to learn what not to pick. We both became sort of amateur mycologists, or botanists, I guess you could say. I actually have a degree in biology from the University of Bonn, so for me it was always scientific, even on soft Saturday afternoons when we could just lie in a meadow and dream our best lives. He abruptly stopped as the fire cracked and snapped in its small fury. He stared at it for a long moment. Please go on, I implored. Would you like more wine? He asked. Oh, I better not. I have to get back and make dinner and you can't drink and cook? All the best chefs of the world can, he teased, smiling a playful yet otherworldly smile and sipping from his mug. Well, it seems I'm not one of the best chefs then, I countered, though one of Alfred's few good points is that no matter how badly I mess up or burn his dinner, he nearly always eats what's put in front of him. I thought but didn't say aloud. Touché, he conceded. Well, to get back to Lisette. Yes, Lisette. My young and golden dream. My warm poem from the stars, he recounted wistfully. That's beautiful, I complimented him, thinking to myself. No such poetic words from your paramour. Just do this, do that, shut up, etc. Yes, thank you. We met in college. She was going to be a veterinarian or a cellist. She couldn't make up her mind, so one day she went to see her father about it, and he said, don't do music because you'll never make any money at it. Be a doctor instead. Even though she'd had years of lessons and recitals. So she gave up on her dream and went to her second best one. She really did love animals, too, so she did that, but she always played as well. He trailed off, looking as if he was caught in a whirlpool of nostalgic sentiment, the swells welling him up with tears. Oh, Florian, it sounds like she meant so much to you. I'm so sorry she's gone. Never mind, you don't have to. No, it's okay. Well, to make a long story short, she blamed herself for a botched surgery when a circus elephant was brought into the university hospital in Munich with peritonitis, or something like that. She never could get over it, this big, glorious beast, and she's heading the surgery team. First, she was incredibly pissed off that it was in the circus. She swears it looked at her. It spoke telepathically to her, too. Please save me, it said to her over and over, which ultimately she, could not. Oh my God. Wow, that must have been hard, I said in complete sympathy. Florian's eyes looked almost elephantine themselves, with their deep rings around them, the rings of Saturn. Yes, it was, for her, and for me as well, watching her go through the agony of that. The elephant's name was Shiva as well, a circus elephant, prisoner, named Shiva. It just messed her up totally. Never forgave herself, even after it was shown there was nothing they could have done, that the surgical team wasn't at fault in any way. The elephant was already inexorably dying. So let me guess, she had some kind of a breakdown or went into a depression, I inquired gently. The fire snapped again, and one of Florian's exotic birds squawked somewhere in another part of the darkened house. Well, at first it was a real rage at the circus company, who likely brought that condition on or failed to catch it in time with their treatment of Shiva. She made phone calls, sent angry letters, started a letter-writing campaign against the circus company, lobbied to get these operations put out of business. She went out flyering streets and cars for weeks and months to get people to boycott the circuses and zoos. She even went door to door, but by and large people were pretty deaf to her efforts, which were cutting into her work. It would keep her up nights, and then she would go into work at 7 in the morning and be groggy and not 100%. So eventually she really did botch a rather simple appendicitis job on a poodle and was put on paid leave. That's when the real trouble started. Yeah, let me get us some more wine. And I'm going to leave off there at page 30, still on part 1. But I wanted to here's the back cover of Dead to Love, which says, a woman's search for her disappeared child, the uncovering of a demonic conspiracy involving her own husband, journeys to other worlds of magic and peril. Constance Gerard is at the end of her marriage and at the beginning of a transformative voyage of self-discovery, mind-blowing new powers, and a world on the brink of incredible changes. Dive in if you dare and discover a world of total redemption, romance, revelation, and of those dead to love, encountering those who've mastered its power. Okay, thanks for listening, and there's more to come. That was part 2 of my reading of Dead to Love, my second novel. Thank you.